And record. All right, everybody. This is the community meeting for the Kubernetes. I am your host with the most. My name is Marky. I am with Sysdig. I'm part of the Contribex. Couple quick things. I've got my note takers, my streamers. This is a recorded meeting, so please do me a favor and speak nice and be excellent to one another. And let's see here. We're going to go ahead and get right into it. Is everybody ready? I like that. Okay. First up on deck, we have release updates. And I do not see Guinevere on here. Is anybody from release? Oh, there she is. There she is. I see her. I see her. Hi, Guinevere.
Hi.
It's you.
About me.
Yeah, your ears started burning. You're like, wait a minute, wait a minute. You're on deck for release updates.
Okay, yep, that is me. I was just updating the notes and thought that my Zoom link would just magically link me to every one of you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Guinevere Sanger. I am the release lead for Kubernetes version 1.17. We are currently in week 4 of the release cycle. And the big announcements are enhancements freeze is next Tuesday, end of day, 5 p.m. Pacific. Bring in your caps, make sure they're all polished and shiny and ready to go. I sent out an announcement to KDev as well as the SIG leads regarding this deadline. Also, we have a lot of really exciting stuff happening on October 15. We are going to cut the Alpha 2 release of 1.17. Everything for that is planned. We have multiple patch releases as well. 1.15.5, 1.16.2, 1.14.8, and 1.13.12, which is expected to be the final release of the 1.13 branch. So everything looks ready to go. And for those who want to try pre-releases, please go to town and let us know of any issues you encounter. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and awesome job to all of the release team and the Shadows, which I am one of. All righty. Anybody have anything else from release? Nope.
Any questions?
Okay, moving right along, we will go into the SIG updates. On deck, we have Jay from Working Group Security Audit. Thank you very much, Jay. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, great. I'm just coming off mute and preparing to share my screen.
Almost there with the screen share.
Almost there with the screen sharing. You got it. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yep.
Perfect. Hi, my name's Jay Beal. I'm, let's see, I work in Guardians. I'm one of the leads of the Security Audit Working Group. We've also got Aaron Small, I can see in this meeting on deck, so he'll likely wave if you can see him in all the pictures. I'm going to just talk. I've timed this for 10 minutes, and just tell you about what we did. So for us, we led the first in a series of Kubernetes security audits, and that sounds like a lot less work than it is. This is kind of what it came down to, basically sitting down and figuring out what the first audit's needs were, how to focus that. You'll see that on future slides. Choosing vendors to participate in an RFP, issuing an RFP, and going through and scoring the vendors and giving our recommendations on who should work on it. And that led to 2 vendors working together on this security audit. So we gave them direction to focus their effort, and then we participated in the threat modeling work, and I'll talk a little bit about that as we go. In the end, we were performing tech editing on the reports and on the other deliverables that came out of this, and we focused on making sure that we were producing reusable artifacts, and one of the biggest ones there is the threat model for the Kubernetes project. And that threat model is, in particular, really it's both useful to the future security audits for Kubernetes, but it's also useful in general in development and design. And I encourage everybody to take a look at it. We'll have a link to it toward the end of the slide deck. I want to note that the security audits are complementary to public bug bounty. Bug bounties are great because they give an incentive to security researchers all over the planet to look for vulnerabilities and to put their time into them. The security audits are they complement this really well. Part of that's because you get more complete code coverage. You're able to define focus, and you're able to get those kind of extra deliverables I'm going to be talking about. So I'm going to talk first about the threat model, and I'm watching my time really closely. So we developed a threat model that was focused on 8 critical components that you see in the lower left corner, basically the master components, the API server, etcd server, the scheduler, the controllers, and then on the node components, the kubelet, the kube proxy, the container runtime interface. And that was where we put our focus. It's really important in each one of these audits or in the threat modeling that we have some kind of focus, or else you're just spread really, the vendor's efforts get spread way too thin. And so we looked at those in the threat modeling. We looked at those across 6 control families: networking, crypto, auth-in, auth-z, secrets management, multi-tenancy. And we've gotten to have some conversations with the multi-tenancy working group too. And then as we're looking through that, a lot of the focus comes down to defining trust zones and saying what can components in one trust zone do to things that are outside their trust zone and things that are inside their trust zone. And I'm going to be talking about that, the granularity of those trust zones real soon on a future slide. So here there are a whole lot of recommendations in the threat model. There are a whole lot of recommendations in the vulnerability report as well. But I wanted to give you just a few of the highlights that came up, both to give you a taste and also honestly because this is a great avenue in a 10-minute briefing to be able to share some of the guidance we got. One was the vendors recommended that we provide auditing information in Kubernetes in a more unified fashion so that we do it. There are components that don't give you a whole lot. There are components that give you more, but right now you can't trace the actions of a single user through the system, and that makes doing incident response when there's been a cluster compromise or when there's been some kind of improper activities much more difficult. They recommended that we warn users who are configuring a security control that it's not going to be enforced. There are a couple cases of this. One was, I know I've run into this, if you are using a CNI that doesn't support egress policies, then those egress policies, you can define them, but you won't realize they're not being enforced. Pod security policies was another example where if the admission controller is not activated, you can set pod security policies and you won't realize, particularly if you're new to the project, that those aren't being enforced. There were 3 others that were really useful to call out. So one was transport encryption. This came down to kind of 2 areas. One is that there are multiple components using clear text HTTP, and there are also even more cases where you have components that aren't verifying that the things they're connecting to are actually the right things, that they're doing certificate verification either on HTTPS. This also was really common in SSH. The other 2 big threat model recommendations here were that we should do what we can to prevent a node compromise from leading to a cluster compromise. So a couple of the issues that came up there, at least one has been fixed at this point, was that host access. If you compromise the host, or even if you just are on the host outside of container, You can run a PS and get access to command line arguments, and there are secrets that are being passed there. The other was there are things that are showing up in logs, and we've got another mention of that. And then the last one was when I talked to that threat model defining those six trust zones. All the controllers, the controllers all end up in a single binary, so you don't have a lot of way to separate privilege levels between the controllers and to contain an issue that shows up in one controller from impacting the others. So I'll speak now just a little bit about the vulnerability audit. So that vulnerability audit, this was what I'd call a best effort vulnerability audit. We had a budget and we used it. We used it well. We focused it well, but our time was split between vulnerability research and then threat. And the threat model would be very useful and a pair of security white papers. But in doing that, we found 37 vulnerabilities. These are all reported back into the project, and you can find the issue tracking on a future slide in here. So here are just 6 vulnerability highlights that came up, and I'm just we've already talked about the non-authenticated HTTPS. So we got dinged on certificate revocation not being a supported feature yet. We got dinged on being able to basically bypass the host path volume pod security policies by using persistent volumes which aren't held to the same security policy. There was a time of check, time of use race condition in the kubelet. There was an improperly patched. Well, this one was cool. The kube control CP had a directory traversal, and that got fixed. But the security audit actually found that the fix wasn't complete, and so that issue was while the project thought that was gone, that was still in play. And then the last one, this was medium severity, but I've included it here. Because it came down to that wider question of stopping a node compromise from leading to a cluster compromise, and that was that the system logs on the nodes were getting bearer tokens, they were getting iSCSI credentials and other secrets, and so that's actually logged as a pair of issues. There were, as I said, a lot more. I'm just kind of giving you the quick highlights. So the overall recommendations that we got out of that, outside of fix those bugs, was when the teams read the code, one of the things they found was they kept finding the same functionality re-implemented by different people in different parts of the code, and so they strongly recommended that we go and find those and create central libraries, and then work to educate the developer community that those libraries exist. They asked us to make more secure configuration easier, and that meant partly that our defaults should get better, and to be honest, they have since the version that was looked at here, but also that we should better document what those defaults are, how they work, and catch up as they change. I can speak to that with anybody who wants to know, and then we document that we improve the documentation of how you do secure configuration of Kubernetes. The last one was just there are sections of the code that don't have very good documentation or don't have enough, especially where they're using external dependencies. And then they gave us an attaboy on RBAC and said, please continue developing security features as strong as RBAC has been. So you can find our deliverables, the threat model, the vulnerability report, the 2 white papers. At the first link here, you can find each of the issues, each of the vulnerabilities that were opened as an issue in this issue tracking page. I just want to say we've had great response from the community, both working on tackling the findings and just feedback on what we did. So our next plans are actually in an hour. We have our next meeting to discuss the next security audit in series. I think that we'll likely focus on 2 things. So one is further vulnerability discovery, and that gets easier now that we've done that initial audit. And the other is secure configuration guidance, being able to issue that. And that's a request we've gotten from a lot of people who we've talked to about the audit, including from the multi-tenancy working group. So also we'll be trying to follow up on the recommendations from the threat model, the ones that are more qualitative or that are not as easily just turned into a single into a single GitHub issue. And of course, we'll be interacting with the CNCF and with SIG Security, our sponsoring SIG. Here's where to find us. These are our GitHub handles, our homepage, and you can find us active in a Slack channel. And then finally, I just want to issue a few thank yous. So the big one is basically we had a number of volunteers. I may have missed somebody, but we had a number of volunteers, this upper right corner, people from other SIGs that participated in the threat model that were in interviews. I also want to just mention that Aaron Small, who's on here, did a ton on those threat model interviews. I was on one or two. He was on basically all of them, and we got the benefit of his past experience, especially at Microsoft, where they I won't say they invented threat modeling. That wouldn't be true, but they certainly popularized it and refined it quite a bit. So, thank you very much. That's it from us.
Thank you. Thank you. This is like amazing information, and there's a lot of work going into this. So I thank you and the team and everybody involved for doing this, because, you know, the more we put effort into focusing on this, the better this open source project is going to be. And as it's gaining a lot of visibility, as we see all over the social media platforms, doing this is just super awesome. And it just shows the dedication and diligence from the team. So again, thank you very, very, very much.
We really appreciated the chance to help. We're gonna, Aaron and I are actually doing a KubeCon talk for anybody who wants more detail than I just gave you. And we're really happy to be invited to speak today in this meeting. So if you ever want us again, we're happy to bring it again.
Don't threaten me with a good time.
Will do.
Thank you again very much. Okay, moving right along. Next on deck is SIG testing. Is it Freda? Fajita? I'm so confused and I feel like I'm butchering it.
The J is a Y sound, so it's Feta.
Jeez. So sorry.
No problem.
You are on deck, so take it away.
All right, thank you very much. Let me do the same, share the screen type thing. All right, so hold on a second.
I can stall. I can talk about how bad I butchered the J and the Y and how super apologetic I am.
No need to do that. But let me see here if I think this is what I want to do. Okay, does anybody see that? Maybe? Yes. Okay, cool. Okay, so we're all good?
All good.
Good. All right. So yes, this is the SIG testing update, talking about some of the stuff we have been working on recently.
Yep.
And one thing that hopefully will be useful to all of you is that the test grid config now lives alongside any proud jobs you define. So in the test info repo, there is historically both a very large test grid YAML file and then a bunch of different files that's for each SIG and or each repo, where you're defining your pre-submits and post-submits and periodic jobs that you may want to run. And you used to have to do a bunch of boring stuff about sort of pasting the same information in lots of different places. Now, in one location, you can write your proud job and then specify which test grid dashboards it wants to live in. And then any of the boilerplate, we will now figure out. So one, it is helpful because there is less boilerplate to deal with, but it is, and that's good. But another benefit is that since the files are now split apart into different directories, you no longer are waiting as long for the central test grid maintainers to come along and approve your PR. So you have your own folder, and that has an owner's file, and so you can, approve. You and whatever people you are working with can quickly approve and get new jobs added. And then another benefit is that historically we spent some time sort of migrating all of the 1.16 jobs to the 1.17 release, which was mostly not exactly the most exciting activity, and so now that is largely automated. And so hopefully, that will continue to be useful in this next release. We have been working on a bunch of monitoring, Prometheus-based monitoring. So one of the challenges is a lot of times with Prow there has historically not been a super great way other than determining if the pod is crashing, whether or not it's performing correctly or not. And so we have been doing a bunch of work there to make that better so that we can sort of have graphs and define alerts. And the alerts can let us know in Slack when things are going wrong. And so that is sort of the foundation there is super useful, and we're very excited about that. A lot of good contributions from Red Hat in that area, and very happy they upstreamed it to Upstream Prow, so that's super cool. Now there are a ton of, there's a very common pattern to have a bunch of like hack verify foo or hack update foo scripts in every different repos. And so we are working on trying to consolidate that a little bit, but with reusable rules that, so that essentially we can have them in one location. So if you want to make sure, if you want to have a pre-submit validate that their files are Go formatted, or that you pass Golang CI-lint, or that you don't have spelling errors or something, we're trying to put that in a central repo, which then other repos that are using Bazel can then consume and easily get into their repo. And so we're pretty excited about that potential. Kind, hope maybe many of you already know, it is sort of a way to deploy a Kubernetes cluster, multi-node Kubernetes cluster into a single Docker container. And it is super helpful for developers. And yeah, so we've been making a bunch of progress there. So it now has smaller images, which help you launch faster, given that it's using new providerless Kubernetes builds. And this has also, oh, I guess there's a typo there. So we're doing both IPv6 and IPv4 test coverage with Kind, which is great. We've been trying to increase the amount of coverage. So the pull Kubernetes EE GCE job is sort of the, I don't know, the standard pre-submit job that we run in the Kubernetes repo. And so we now have a Kind-based pre-submit that does essentially most of the same coverage. But the benefit is that it doesn't have any dependencies on cloud resources. And so if either your internet connection is slow, or you do not want to, pay GCP or some other provider a bunch of money for every time you want to run ADE tests, you can do that with Kind, which we are very excited about. Also, we have been, we make pretty extensive use of TestGrid, and we are working with the TestGrid team inside of Google to make that more accessible to other people by open sourcing it. And so part of it now lives inside the Google Cloud Platform TestGrid repo. And so we are happy about that work. And yes, all right. So for the next cycle, things we are thinking about is one, now that we have all this alerting, we want to sort of start taking better advantage of it by adding sufficient metrics and graphs and alerts, so that the goal is that we want to automatically detect when life is unhappy. A lot of times, maybe even most of the time now, the way we hear about outages is by somebody reporting them on the testing ops channel in Slack. And so we would much rather have a bot do that rather than, so hopefully we can detect and recover from any sort of problems before it starts impacting people. And so we are, so that's something we are prioritizing. We'd also like to promote Kind into being a blocking pre-submit in the KK repo. So we're working on making that work. We've also been collaborating with the Kate's Infra working group to help out with image pushing. So inside of the test infra repo, we do a bunch of GitOps based, like you merge your commits and we'll immediately publish the image based on whatever those changes are. We want to extend that to more places. And so we have some recipes that we've been working on to try that out. So ideally, pretty much everybody working in the Kubernetes community should be able to merge a commit and immediately have that image with that new code available. And then the Kate's Infra group has this nifty image promoter that will allow it sort of gives you a GitOps-based process to sort of merge a PR, which then takes one of those staging repos and promotes it to a production repo that people can use. We would like to, have these verify checks get used more commonly. There's also a movement to sort of put Prow into its own repo. We like that Kind is in its own repo. I think that sort of helps get, the people who are interested in Kind, have them find each other and collaborate more effectively. There's a lot of noise in the test infra repo because anytime somebody wants to change a pre-submit job or whatever, that gets mixed in the notification stream with people who might be working on Prow or kubetest or some other utility. And so we think there will be benefit to sort of having Prow be more of a isolated project. Last thing, I guess, is one of the downsides of working with Prow jobs is that there's sort of a centralized, there's like a single repo, the test infra repo, where you have to define your jobs. And a lot of people prefer the strategy that other CI systems use, where you can, in the foo repo, define all the jobs right there. And so we want to figure out the best way to support that. So there's an issue that I've linked here to start, we sort of need to know what, your requirements are for SLOs, like how fast do we need to be? What are the important things about Prow for the GitOps? If something is not working, how quickly do you want us to detect that, et cetera? So if you have opinions, we would like to hear that so that we can incorporate that feedback. And if you are interested in these reusable checks, reach out to us so that we can, or if you have interesting checks in your repo that maybe other repos could benefit from, that would be good. And if you want to use the existing ones, that would also be useful. And yeah, maybe, I think in general, this is sort of a longer term thing, but think about, are there types of tests that you are depending on in the Kubernetes pre-submits that you could potentially either move into something like a Kind job, or maybe move into a release blocking job instead of a pre-submit. We think that the more we can make the Kubernetes pre-submits hermetic, we think that will help reduce flakiness and provide people with a better experience. But that's sort of a longer term thing because that's sort of complicated to think about. Yeah, so here's sort of more details about the Kind project if you are interested in that. Talking about the smaller images again, and the better test coverage, and the yeah, things like that. So go reach out to that community. They are super great. We have a list of help wanted issues that you can look at. So, and then we also have a variety of channels in which you can participate in. And so those are good ways to contribute. And yeah, so the chairs are me and Aaron of XP and Steve and Tim. And here are some links to get some more information. So thank you very much, everybody, for letting me talk at you today. And yeah, that is it.
That is so awesome. Thank you very much. And appreciate all the work you guys do as well. Everybody, not guys, just everybody on that team. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
All righty, now we will move into announcements. Before I get into announcements, did anybody have any questions? Okay. So we have announcements. So we're going to go to the shout outs for this week. Jason D. Tibris gave a shout out to DIMS for building out the end-to-end conformance test using the cluster API and the GPC provider. That is very awesome. Thank you, DIMS, if you're watching this later. And let's see, we have Mr. Bobby Tails, whom I love deeply, gave a shout out to the steering election committee officials. That's Brian Grant, Castro Joe, which is George, and Ihor, and for putting in the work to make this year's election possible. Thank you very much. That is no small feat. They did amazing work there. Also, congratulations to the new steering members. Also, Ihor gave a shout out to Mr. Bobby Tails, another election official. C. Blecker gave a shout out to Ben the Elder, and I've already messed up one name today. I'm not going to do it again. So to @KRZYZACY for late night debugging on the GCE test infra failures. Awesome shout outs, and thank you everybody. That is all I have. Does anyone have anything else they want to add, talk about? We've got time. We did have Signode that was going to give an update, but they are involved in other things. Does anybody else have anything? Does anybody want to talk about fajitas? No fajitas. Crazy Zacy. Wow, I would have really jacked that up. Thank you. Thank you very much. Does anyone else have anything? All right, well, that concludes this community meeting. I thank everybody that presented. I thank Guinevere for the updates of the release. Thank you. Thank you to my streamer, George. Thank you to my note taker, Bob. Thank you to the community. I'm gonna post a link here. I'm hoping that I don't mess this up in the docs. If you wanna host, it's not as hard as it looks. It's actually really easy. This is my second time and I will do more. But we'd like to have different faces. So there is a link there if you would like to sign up to host this meeting. And you're definitely welcome to do so. If nobody else has anything, I will give you guys back like 20 some odd minutes, 27 minutes. Again, thank you everybody and have a great day, evening, night, wherever you are in the world. Thank you.
Bye.
Hey.
Bye, Chris.